The auction house smelled of old money and desperation. Emily Chen pressed herself against the cold marble wall, her heart hammering as she watched the crowd of suited men examine her like livestock. The irony wasn't lost on her that she stood in the same building where priceless art changed hands, except tonight, she was the commodity. Lot 47, the auctioneer's voice cut through the murmur. Miss Emily Chen, 24 years old, university-educated, untouched. Heat flooded her cheeks. 3 months ago, she'd been a graduate student with dreams of opening her own gallery. Her father's gambling debts had reduced her to this. Standing on a velvet-draped platform while strangers bid on her future, the numbers climbed higher. 2 million. 5 million. 8 million. $10 million. The voice came from the back of the room, smooth as aged whiskey and twice as dangerous. Every head turned toward the speaker, and Emily's breath caught in her throat. Julian Blackwood stepped into the light. 6 feet of controlled power in a midnight black suit, with steel-gray eyes that seemed to see straight through her soul. She'd seen his face on magazine covers, heard whispers about the ruthless billionaire who'd built his empire on the bones of his competitors. But seeing him in person was like staring into the eye of a storm. Going once, the auctioneer called. Emily's fingers dug into her palms. This wasn't how her story was supposed to go. She was supposed to fall in love with someone kind, someone who made her laugh, someone who saw her as more than a transaction, going twice. Julian's gaze never left hers. In those gray depths, she saw something unexpected, not the cold calculation she'd braced for, but a flicker of something almost like recognition, as if he knew her from somewhere deeper than this moment. Sold to Mr. Blackwood for $10 million. The gavel came down like a death sentence as the crowd dispersed. Emily remained frozen on the platform. Her father appeared at her side, his face haggard with shame and relief. Emmy, I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry. She couldn't look at him, couldn't speak. Because Julian Blackwood was walking toward them now, each step deliberate and predatory. Miss Chen? His voice was closer now, and she could detect the faint accent. Beneath the American polish, British maybe, or something more exotic. Are you ready to leave? I need a moment with my father. You've had 24 years of moments with your father. Now you belong to me. The words should have terrified her. Instead, they sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. I'm not property, Mr. Blackwood. Smile ghosted across his lips, so brief she almost missed it. No, you're not. He turned to her father. The debt is cleared. Your daughter's contract begins now. Contract. As if she were an employee, not a person whose life had just been auctioned off. Julian's driver held open the door of a black Bentley. Emily slid across leather seats that probably cost more than her entire education. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows as they glided through Manhattan traffic. Where are we going? She asked. Home, home. The word felt foreign. On her tongue, home was her tiny apartment near Columbia, with its leaky faucet in view of a brick wall. Home was certainly not wherever this man lived. They pulled up to a tower of glass and steel that seemed to scrape the belly of the clouds. The penthouse elevator rose so high, Emily's ears popped. When the doors opened, she stepped into another. World floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. Modern art hung on pristine white walls. Everything was sleek, expensive, and utterly without warmth. Your room is down the hall, Julian said, loosening his tie. We'll discuss. Terms in the morning. Terms. He paused, his back to her. You seem to be under the impression that you're here as some kind of medieval bride. You're not. You're here because I need something from you and you need something from me. It's that simple. What could you possibly need from me? Julian turned, and for a moment, his carefully controlled mask slipped. She saw exhaustion in his eyes, and something that looked almost like pain. Legitimacy, he said quietly. In 6 months, I'm inheriting my grandfather's estate. The will stipulates I must be married to a woman of good moral character. You, Miss Chen, despite your current circumstances, fit that description perfectly. And after 6 months, you'll be free to go. With enough money. To start whatever life you choose? Emily stared at him. It was too good to be true, which meant it probably was. What aren't you telling me? Julian's smile was sharp as broken glass. Get some sleep, Emily. Tomorrow, you'll learn what it really means to be a Blackwood. As he disappeared into the shadows of the penthouse, Emily was left alone with the city. Sprawling beneath her feet and the unsettling feeling that she'd just made a deal with the devil himself, but the devil, she was beginning to realize, might be far more complicated than she'd ever imagined. Emily woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize, in a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. For a blissful moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed down like cold water. She was Julian Blackwood's property. Now, bought and paid for. A soft knock interrupted her spiral of despair. Miss Chen. Mr. Blackwood requests your presence for breakfast. The woman who entered was perhaps 60, with kind eyes and silver hair pulled into a neat bun. She carried a tray of coffee and what looked like fresh croissants. I'm Mrs. Reeves, the housekeeper. I've taken the liberty of having some clothes sent up. Mr. Blackwood thought you might need them. Emily sat up, pulling the silk sheets around her. How many women has he done this with? Mrs. Reeves paused in arranging the breakfast tray. Done. What, dear? Bought them? Owned them? The older woman's expression softened. Oh, child. You're the first. Between you and me, I don't think you're quite what he was expecting. 20 minutes later, Emily found herself in a dining room that could have seated 20 people. Julian sat at the far end of a mahogany table, reading what appeared to be financial reports while drinking coffee from bone china. He looked up. As she entered, his gaze sweeping over the simple black dress she'd chosen from the selection in her room. You look presentable. How flattering. Was that amusement flickering in his eyes? Sit. We have much to discuss. Emily took the chair closest to him rather than the one at the opposite end. If he wanted to play power games, she wouldn't make it easy for him. First, Julian said, setting down his papers, you'll need to understand my world. Tonight we're attending a charity gala. You'll be introduced as my fiancé. Already. People will ask questions. Let them. The story is simple. We met at Columbia during one of my guest lectures. Had a whirlwind romance. You're an art history graduate, which makes you suitable for my circles. Emily's fork paused halfway to her mouth. You've researched me. I researched all my investments. The casual cruelty of his words stung more than it should have. Is that all I am to you? Julian leaned back in his chair, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. What would you prefer to be? The question hung between them, loaded with implications Emily wasn't ready to examine. Instead, she changed the subject. Mrs. Reeves mentioned I'm the first. The first what? Exactly. It's the first woman I've brought here. What about relationships? Girlfriends? Something flickered across his face, too quick to interpret. I don't do relationships, Emily. They're messy, unpredictable, expensive. Everything's a transaction to you, isn't it? Transaction. The sooner you learn that, the easier this will be. But even as he said it, Emily caught him watching her with an intensity that felt anything but transactional. Like he was trying to figure out a puzzle she represented. That evening, Emily stood before a full-length mirror in a gown that probably cost more than her father's annual salary. Midnight blue silk clung to her curves before flowing into a waterfall of fabric. Diamond earrings caught the light like captured stars. She looked like she belonged in Julian's world. She felt like a fraud. Ready? Julian appeared behind her in the mirror, devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo. At the gala, Emily quickly learned that being Julian Blackwood's fiancé was like being a fascinating new exhibit at a museum. People stared, whispered, and asked probing questions disguised as small talk. How romantic, gushed a woman with too much jewelry and not enough sincerity. A whirlwind romance. And you're so young, dear. Age is just a number, Julian said smoothly, his hand warm against Emily's lower back. When you know, you know. He was a masterful actor, Emily realized. To anyone watching, he looked like a man genuinely smitten with his fiancée. He remembered to touch her at just the right moments, leaned in to whisper things that looked intimate, but were actually reminders about people's names or business connections. But as the evening wore on, something shifted. The touches lingered longer than necessary. Her choreographed conversations began to feel almost real. When he laughed at something she said, it sounded genuine. During a waltz with Emily's hand in his and his arm around her waist, she found herself studying his face up close for the first time. There were faint lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, a small scar above his left eyebrow. And when he thought no one was looking, his expression held a loneliness that made her chest ache. "You're staring," he murmured. "I'm trying to figure you out." People who try to figure me out usually end up disappointed. Is that a warning or a challenge? His hand tightened on her waist. Both. The music ended, but neither of them stepped away immediately. In that suspended moment, Emily felt something. Electric passed between them, something that had nothing to do with their arrangement and everything to do with the way he was looking at her like she was the only person in the room. Then someone called Julian's name, and the spell broke. Later. Back in the penthouse, Emily kicked off her heels and sank onto the living room sofa. Julian loosened his bow tie, looking more human than she'd seen him yet. "You did well tonight," he said. "I felt like a performing monkey. You'll get used to it." He poured himself a scotch from a crystal decanter. "The key is remembering it's all theater. Even this? Us talking right now?" Julian paused with the glass halfway to his lips. "What do you think?" Emily studied his face, searching for cracks in his armor. "I think you're not nearly as cold as you pretend to be." "Careful, Emily. That kind of thinking could be dangerous." "Dangerous for whom?" But Julian had already turned away, disappearing into the shadows of the penthouse like a ghost. Emily was left alone with the city lights and the unsettling realization that Julian Blackwood might be the most dangerous man she'd ever met. Not because he was cruel, but because underneath all that ice, she was beginning to suspect there was a fire that could burn them both. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Emily discovered Julian's secret. It happened by accident. She'd been exploring the penthouse during one of his long business meetings when she noticed a door she'd never seen open. Curiosity had always been her weakness, and this time it led her into what could only be described as a shrine. The room was filled with paintings. It's not the sterile modern art that decorated the rest of the penthouse, but raw, emotional canvases that seemed to bleed color and pain. Portraits of a woman with dark hair and kind eyes, landscapes that looked like memories, abstract pieces that felt like screams given form. Shouldn't be in here. Emily spun around to find Julian in the U.S. doorway, his face a mask of controlled fury, but underneath the anger, she saw something else, vulnerability, as raw as the paintings surrounding them. "You painted these?" she said softly. It wasn't a question. "Get out." "Julian, these are beautiful. They're extraordinary." "I said get out." His voice was deadly quiet now, which was somehow more terrifying than if he'd shouted. Emily didn't move. "Who is she, the woman in the portraits?" Julian's hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment she thought he might physically remove her from the room. "Instead," he said, "her name was Sophia. She was my wife. Was, past tense." Emily's heart clenched. What happened to her? "She died because of me." The words came out like broken glass. 3 years ago. Car accident. She was driving to surprise me at the office because I'd missed another dinner, another anniversary, another promise. If I hadn't been such a bastard, if I'd just gone home when I said I would, she'd still be alive. The pain in his voice was so raw it made Emily's chest ache. She took a step toward him, but he held up a hand. Don't you dare pity me." "It's not pity," Emily said quietly. "It's understanding." Julian laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Understanding? You think you understand me because you've seen my dead wife's portraits?" "I understand loss," Emily said. "My mother died. When I was 16, cancer, I watched her fade away for 2 years, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. So no, I don't understand your specific pain, but I understand what it feels like to carry guilt that doesn't belong to you." Something shifted in Julian's expression. The mask cracked just slightly. "She would have hated this," he said, gesturing around the room, keeping her memory locked away like a museum exhibit. "She always said art was meant to be seen, to be felt. She would have wanted these on display, not hidden away like secrets. So why do you hide them? Julian was quiet for so long, Emily thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because seeing them reminds me that I'm capable of creating something beautiful that terrifies me more than anything. Emily moved closer, drawn by his honesty. Why? Because beautiful things can be destroyed. And I destroy everything I touch. You haven't destroyed me. Julian's gaze snapped to hers, intense and searching. Yet, the air between them suddenly felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Emily was acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the way Julian's chest rose and fell, with each breath of the way he was looking at her like she was both salvation and damnation. Emily, he said, her name a warning and a prayer on his lips. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the scar above his eyebrow. What? Happened here, bar fight? When I was 22? Some guy said something about Sophia that I didn't appreciate. You've been protecting people your whole life, haven't you? I've been failing to protect them my whole life. Emily's heart broke a little more. Without thinking, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to the scar. It was meant to be comfort, nothing more. But when she pulled back, Julian's eyes had gone dark with something that made her breath catch. You should go, he said roughly. Julian, please. The words seemed torn from somewhere deep inside him. Just go. Emily left, but she carried the image of his paintings with her. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the raw emotion in those canvases. The way Julian's carefully constructed walls had crumbled for just a moment. The next morning, he was back to his usual controlled self, as if their conversation in the art room had never happened. But Emily noticed things now. The way his jaw tightened when people mentioned love. The way he unconsciously touched his wedding ring, which he still wore on a chain around his neck, hidden beneath his shirts. 2 days later, everything changed. Again, Emily was in the kitchen making coffee when Julian's phone rang. She couldn't help but overhear his end of the conversation, which grew increasingly tense. What do you mean, she's here? Julian's voice was sharp. I made it clear that she wasn't welcome. A pause. No, absolutely not. She lost the right to be. Involved in family business when she... Another pause. Longer this time. Fine. 5 minutes, that's all. He ended the call and stood frozen for a moment, running a hand through his hair. Problem? Emily asked. Julian looked at her as if he'd forgotten she was there. My mother is downstairs. She wants to meet you. Your mother? I didn't know you had family. I don't. Not really. Julian's expression had gone cold again, but this time Emily recognized it as armor, not indifference. Victoria Blackwood disowned. Me when I married Sophia. She thought a painter's daughter wasn't good enough for the Blackwood name. She's only interested now because of the inheritance. Emily set down her coffee cup. What do you want me to do? Play the part. Convince her you're exactly the kind of woman she always wanted me to marry. Can you do that? Emily straightened her shoulders. I can do that. But as they rode the elevator down to meet Victoria Blackwood, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to face something far more dangerous than any business rival or society matron. They were about to face Julian's past, and all the ghosts that came with it. Victoria Blackwood was exactly what Emily had expected and nothing like she'd prepared for. Tall, elegant, with silver hair that looked like spun platinum and eyes the same steel gray as her son's. She radiated the kind of power that came from generations of wealth and influence. But there was something else in her gaze as it swept over Emily. Calculation so cold it made Julian's business negotiations look warm and fuzzy. So, Victoria said, settling into the penthouse's living room, as if she owned it, this is the famous Emily Chen, mother. Julian's voice was carefully neutral, but Emily could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from a forge. Julian, darling, you look well. Though I hear you've been making some rather impulsive decisions lately. Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. $10 million, was it? Rather expensive for a wife, don't you think? Emily's blood ran cold. Victoria knew about the auction. I don't know what you're talking about, Julian said smoothly. Please, darling. I know everything that happens in this city, including the fact that your charming fiancé was sold to pay off her father's gambling debts. Victoria turned that calculating gaze on Emily. Though I must say, dear, you're certainly getting good value for the investment. Emily lifted her chin, refusing to be cowed. I'm sorry, Mrs. Blackwood, but I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, dear. I'm stating facts. You were purchased like a prized horse, and now you're being paraded around as the future Mrs. Blackwood to help Julian claim his inheritance. Victoria's smile grew sharper. The question is, what are you planning to do about it? I'm planning to marry your son, Emily said evenly. For how long? Till the will is satisfied and you can take your payout and disappear? Emily felt Julian go rigid beside her, but before he could speak, Victoria continued. You see, I've done some research on you, Miss Chen. Graduated summa cum laude from Columbia. Art history with a focus on Renaissance masters. You have talent, ambition, and from what I can tell, a conscience. Which begs the question, why are you really here? Because I love him. The words slipped out before Emily could stop them. Room went dead silent. Even Victoria looked surprised, though she recovered quickly. How touching, Victoria said dryly. And does he love you back? Emily glanced at Julian, whose face had gone completely blank. That's between us. I doubt that very much. Victoria stood, smoothing her designer skirt. Julian, walk me out. We have things to discuss. Privately, Julian's jaw tightened, but he rose. 5 minutes. As they headed toward the elevator, Emily caught fragments of their heated conversation. Double quotes. ... Memory. ... Destroying yourself. ... She's not what you think. When Julian returned 20 minutes later, his face was thunderous.
What
did she want? Emily asked. To remind me that I'm exactly like her, manipulative, cold, willing to use people to get what I want. You're nothing like her. Julian laughed harshly. I bought you, Emily. I'm using you to get my inheritance, just like she used me to maintain her social standing. That's not the same thing, isn't it? Julian moved to the window, staring out at the city. She made me an offer, counterproposal. To our arrangement, Emily's stomach dropped. What kind of offer? $20 million? Cash? In exchange for calling off our engagement and disappearing from my life? The number hit Emily like a physical blow. $9 million. Enough to pay off her father's debts twice over and still have enough left to live comfortably for the rest of her life. What did you tell her? Emily asked quietly. Julian turned to face her, his expression unreadable. I told her I'd discuss it with you. It's your choice, Emily. 20 million to walk away, or 6 months of this charade for considerably less. Emily stared at him. Is that what you want? For me to take the money and leave? What I want is irrelevant. That's not an answer. Julian's control finally cracked. What I want is impossible. I want Sophia back. I want to undo every mistake I've made in the last 3 years. I want to be the kind of man who deserves someone like you, instead of the bastard who bought you at an auction. The raw pain in his voice made Emily's heart clench. Julian, ... don't. He held up a hand. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Take the money, Emily. Start over somewhere far away from here. Forget you ever met me. And if I don't want to forget you? Julian's eyes closed as if her words caused him physical pain. Then you're even more foolish than I thought. Emily walked to him, stopping just close enough to see the faint tremor in his hands. The way his breathing had gone shallow and uneven. You want to know what I think? She said softly. I think you're terrified that if you let yourself care about me, something will happen to me too. I think you're so afraid of losing someone else that you'd rather push me away first. Emily, stop. I think underneath all that ice and anger and guilt, you're just a man who loved his wife so much that losing her broke something inside you. And I think you're afraid that if you let that broken piece heal, you'll be betraying her memory. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Emily reached up and touched his face, the same way she had in the art room. This time, he didn't pull away. Sophia wouldn't want you to stop living, Julian. She would want you to be happy. You didn't know her. No, but I've seen her through your paintings. I've seen the love in every brushstroke, the way you captured not just how she looked, but how she made you feel. That's not the work of a man who doesn't understand love. That's the work of a man who understands it completely. Julian's defenses finally crumbled completely. His hand came up to cover hers, pressing her palm against his cheek. "I can't lose you too," he whispered. "You won't." "You don't know that, no," Emily admitted. "I don't. But I know that hiding from life isn't living. It's just existing. And you're worth so much more than just existing." Julian stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then, without warning, he kissed her. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate, hungry, full of 3 years of suppressed emotion and the sudden realization that maybe, just maybe, he was allowed to want something for himself again. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Emily, Julian," said her name, a question and a promise all at once. "I'm not taking your mother's money," Emily said firmly. "I'm staying. For better or worse, I'm staying." Julian's smile was the first genuine one she'd ever seen from him. "You might regret that decision. Let me worry about my own regrets." But even as she said it, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria Blackwood wasn't finished with them yet, and that the real test of their relationship was still to come. The attack came at dawn. 2 weeks before Julian's inheritance was set to be finalized, Emily woke to the sound of Julian's phone buzzing incessantly. Through sleep-fogged eyes, she watched him answer it, his face growing increasingly grim with each passing second. "What do you mean frozen?" Emily sat up, instantly alert. Julian was already reaching for his clothes, his movements sharp and efficient. "Victoria," he said after ending the call, "she's filed an injunction claiming our engagement is fraudulent. All my assets are frozen pending investigation." "Can she do that? With the right judge and enough evidence, she can do anything." Julian's smile was bitter. "She's always been 3 steps ahead of everyone else." Emily's mind raced. "What kind of evidence?" "Bank records showing the auction payment. Probably. Maybe recorded conversations. She's been planning this from the moment she walked into our penthouse." The full weight of their situation hit Emily like a physical blow. "So we've lost." "Not yet." Julian turned to face her, and Emily was startled by the determination in his eyes. "There's one thing she didn't count on." "What's that?" "I might actually fight for something I want to keep." Over the next 48 hours, Emily watched Julian transform into someone she'd never seen before. Gone was the controlled, calculated businessman. In his place was a man fighting for his life, his future, and something even more precious, the possibility of love. He worked around the clock, calling in favors from allies Victoria didn't know he had, finding loopholes in legal documents she thought were airtight. But it was Emily who provided the key to their salvation. "The paintings," she said suddenly, as Julian paced the living room like a caged wolf. "What about them? Sophia's paintings." "The ones you did of her. They're extraordinary, Julian." "They're not just art, they're proof." "Proof of what?" Emily grabbed his hands, stopping his restless movement. "Proof that you're capable of real love. Proof that our relationship isn't just a business transaction. So those paintings show the kind of man you really are, underneath all the armor you wear." Julian stared at her. "You want me to display my dead wife's portraits to convince people I love my living fiancé? I want you to show the world that Julian Blackwood isn't the cold bastard everyone thinks he is. That he's a man who loves so deeply it transforms. Him, the same man who painted those masterpieces, is the same man who's been afraid to love again." It was a risk. A huge, terrifying risk that could backfire spectacularly. But Julian looked at Emily's determined face and found himself nodding. The gallery opening was scheduled for the night before the final hearing. Emily had called in every favor she'd accumulated during her art history studies, reaching out to critics, collectors, and influencers. Word spread through the art world like wildfire. Julian Blackwood's secret paintings were being revealed. The gallery was packed. Lee stood near the entrance, watching people's faces as they encountered Julian's work for the first time. She saw surprise, then awe, then something like reverence as they realized they were witnessing the private emotional journey of one of the world's most powerful men. Julian appeared at her side, devastating in a black suit, but more nervous than she'd ever seen him. Second thoughts? She asked softly. About 1,000 of them. Victoria Blackwood entered at that moment, her expression carefully neutral as she surveyed the crowd. Emily watched her stop in front of the largest painting, a portrait of Sophia laughing in golden sunlight, and for just a moment her mask slipped. She was beautiful, Victoria said, when Julian and Emily approached. Yes, she was. Victoria was. Quiet for a long moment, studying the painting. I was wrong about her, you know. About Sophia. I thought she wasn't good enough for you, but I was really afraid she was too good for you. Julian's jaw tightened. Why are you here, Mother? To see if you've learned to fight for what matters. Victoria turned to Emily. And 2, see if you're brave enough to love a man like my son. I don't understand. Victoria's smile was the first genuine one Emily had ever seen from her. The injunction, the frozen accounts, the legal battle, it was all a test. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. A test. I needed to know if Julian had learned to fight for love instead of just accepting loss. And I needed to know if you were here out of genuine feeling or mere convenience. Victoria glanced around the gallery. All of this, tells me everything I needed to know. Julian looked like he might strangle his mother with his bare hands. You put us through hell for a test? I put you through a challenge. There's a difference. Victoria's expression grew serious. Your grandfather's will doesn't just require you to be married, Julian. It requires you to be married to someone who loves you genuinely, completely, and selflessly. Someone willing to fight for you the way you were never willing to fight for yourself. Emily stared at her. How could you possibly measure that? By creating a situation where love was the only logical choice. When I offered you $20 million to walk away, you refused. When Julian's world came crashing down, you helped him fight instead of running. And when faced with the choice between protecting your reputation and proving your love, you chose love. The older woman moved closer to the painting of Sophia, her expression softening. Julian, your wife was an extraordinary woman, but she's gone and you're not. Sophia would want you to live, to love, to create beauty in the world. These paintings prove you can do all of that. Julian's voice was rough. When he spoke, so the inheritance will be yours, along with my blessing and my apology. To both of you. As Victoria walked away, disappearing into the crowd of admirers, Emily felt Julian's hand find hers. So, he said quietly, it appears we're both free. No contracts, no obligations, no strings attached. What do you want to do? Emily looked around. The gallery, at the evidence of Julian's capacity for love displayed on every wall, at the man who'd learned to fight for his happiness and felt her heart expand with possibility. I want to marry you, she said simply. Not because of any inheritance or contract or arrangement, but because I love you, Julian Blackwood. All of you. The artist, the businessman, the man who carries his ghosts with grace. Julian's smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. Are you sure? Because loving me comes with complications. I'm still learning how to do this, how to let someone in without being terrified they'll disappear. I'm sure, Emily said, rising on her tiptoes. To kiss him, sides, I like complications. Around them, the gallery buzzed with appreciation for Julian's art. But Emily was only aware of the man in her arms, the way he held her like she was precious and fragile and strong all at once. There's something I need to tell you, Julian said against her lips. What's that? The night I bought you at that auction, it wasn't just about the inheritance. From the moment I saw you standing on that platform, refusing to look defeated, even though your world was falling apart, I knew you were dangerous. Dangerous how? Dangerous. To every wall I'd built, every rule I'd made about never letting anyone matter again. I told myself it was business, but part of me knew I was lying.
Ow.
Julian's hands framed her face. I think I started falling for you before I even knew your name. Emily's heart swelled. You know what I think? What? I think Sophia would approve. Of us. Julian glanced at the portrait of his late wife, and for the first time, Emily saw peace in his expression instead of pain. Yeah, he said softly. I think she would too. 6 months later, Emily stood in the penthouse that had become home, watching Julian add finishing touches to a new painting. This one wasn't of Sophia, or of memory, or of loss. It was of Emily herself, captured in a moment of laughter, surrounded by the warm light of their living room. "It's beautiful," she said, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "You're beautiful," Julian corrected, leaning into her embrace. "The painting is just my attempt to capture what I see when I look at you. And what's that?" "Everything I never thought I deserved. Everything I was too afraid to want." Emily smiled, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. On her left hand, a simple but elegant diamond ring caught the afternoon light. They'd married quietly the month before, with only Mrs. Reeves and Emily's father as witnesses. Victoria had sent an enormous arrangement of white roses and a note that simply read, "Welcome to the family." "I have news," Emily said. Julian set down his brush, turning in her arms. "Good news or bad news? Depends on how you feel about chaos, sleepless nights, and tiny humans who will probably inherit your artistic talent and my stubborn streak." Julian's eyes widened. "Emily, are you saying what I think you're saying?" She nodded, watching his wonder and joy, and just a touch of terror crossed his features. "A baby," he whispered. "A baby." Julian kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of promises for the future. When they broke apart, Emily saw tears in his eyes. "I love you," he said, the words coming easier now, like he'd been practicing them. "I love you so much, it still scares me sometimes." "Good," Emily said, smiling. "Love should be a little scary. It means it matters." As the sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Emily reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. She'd been sold at an auction, bought by a man who thought he was incapable of love, and somehow found herself with a husband who painted masterpieces in a future full of infinite possibility. Julian was right about one thing: love was dangerous. It had the power to destroy and the power to create, to break you down and build you up again. But standing in their home, surrounded by art that told the story of their love, Emily knew she wouldn't trade that danger for all the safety in the world. Outside their windows, the city sparkled with a million lights, each one representing a life, a story, a chance for transformation. Emily and Julian had found their transformation in each other, in the space between what was and what could be. And if their story had taught them anything, it was that sometimes the most beautiful art came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes love found you when you least expected it, in forms you never imagined, through paths you never would have chosen, but it always found you exactly when you were ready to receive it. Asterisk the end. Asterisk asterisk like this video, if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales, and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.